And you, Bill?
Well, like Ray, I think it's a really powerful experience to just sit and be with somebody. Um, I think the two women and the psychotherapist that started the Zen Hospice project had an idea that they could fuel their spiritual practice and do service by being able to train people to sit with the dying, because one of the ways that people cope with their grief or their lack of comfort around the dying is often to be doing things, to think they have to feed them, they have to give them juice, they have to be massaging them, they have to be adjusting their pillows. And sometimes all the resident really needs is a comforting presence, somebody who's able to merely sit for a half hour to an hour at bedside, maybe holding their hand. And some residents don't like that. It's almost comical. I sat by one resident quietly for a half an hour and then asked if it was okay if I could leave. So I needed to go to the bathroom, and he said, "That's fine, go torment somebody else." And then there are some residents that want to be surrounded by presence when they're actively dying. I've seen some that will be surrounded by their favorite nursing staff member, and 3 or 4 volunteers will be surrounding their bed because they're frightened, and they take comfort in having people with them.
Is it frustrating to know that the client is going to die? Is that a hard thing, knowing that they're not going to be there, or that whatever work you do will come to an end when they pass away?
I didn't find it frustrating. I think I went into this knowing that these people had life-threatening illness and probably terminal illness, and that it was I was like kind of walking with them on their path as far as I could. I really liked that Bill addressed the spiritual aspect of this work, because I didn't really have a real spiritual focus at the time I started this. It was probably because of this that I became interested more in spiritual work, and but just realizing that spending time with people is a way in this way was benefit me, is kind of a reciprocal giving and receiving at the same time is really a spiritual thing, and it really opened my eyes to investigating things like Buddhism and meditation and other forms of spirituality. And I think that's really, if you asked earlier the benefits that I got from this work, I think that's probably maybe one of the biggest benefits I've gotten, is the awareness of the temporariness of life, and the fleeting time that we actually have here, whether it's meeting someone for the last week of their lives, or whether we have a relationship with someone for years. It's still
So
fleeting.
There's really a lot to learn about saying goodbye or accepting the impermanence of those relationships,
Yes.
without getting upset by it. And how about you, Bill? Was it hard working with people who weren't going to be around for the long term?
I think that is a challenge, to show up in a meaningful way, bring all of yourself to that practice and to that relationship, when you know that for sure it will be impermanent. But some volunteers grow very attached to residents, and they're definitely grief-stricken when, say, a long-term resident dies. And I certainly miss often the warm and sometimes funny interactions, and sometimes even the challenge of dealing with some mean, cranky residents. You do find there's an attachment, but I'm always relieved for them, because even though our greatest fear, I think, in dying is suffering and pain, and pain management has reached such a state of the art that one can be treated and kept free of pain with a terminal illness, but at some point there is a kind of an emotional suffering, and there's a certain element of physical suffering. The fact that your world gets smaller, there's less and less that you can do. I mean, I've seen residents losing control of their mind, losing control of their hands. They can't walk anymore. They can't toilet themselves anymore. And I find there's a sense of relief when somebody is finally able to let go of their body and move on, and say they have done enough with that body, that it's like a form of decrepitude when it just doesn't serve you anymore. So I always find I'm relieved when they pass.
So really the experience is not so much about fighting against death as finding some way to flow with it or accept it,
to reconcile that, that it's coming. And some residents don't have the cognitive ability to deal with that. I mean, many of ours, and the system here at SF General or at Laguna Honda, they're off the streets. They've had problems with addiction. Many of them are mentally ill. We have paranoid schizophrenics on the ward that are not quite able to fully process their death emotionally, but they're definitely having all kinds of body and emotional experiences, and I find that's part of the challenge too, is in realizing they're not always going to relate and converse with you as your friends might. Their experience is going to be unique.
I think another lesson that came up for me was, the actual opportunity to practice being in the present moment with this person. And, it's not so much about what's going to happen next, or how long is this person going to be alive, or how long is this person going to be able to understand me. But it's about just spending time in the present moment with this person and accepting whatever is, if they're in pain, to learn to be able to be with them while they're in pain, or if they want to be distracted by having some conversation, then it's being in the present moment by conversing with them, or being in the present moment by just massaging their feet and bringing their attention to something that could feel good, even if they're uncomfortable, anxious, or physically in pain. There's still some part of them that can feel good, and I think it's about being in the present moment with someone.
So would you say the effect of working with the terminally ill was to make you more stressed out or calmer? Obviously at the beginning there's some stress in a new situation, but over the long term, how did it affect you in your life outside of the situation where you were working with the terminally ill?
I think for me it opens up compassion.
I definitely felt like it helps me to become more calm. I think acceptance, learning to accept whatever is. I mean, there are so many things that are beyond my control, beyond the patient's control, beyond the doctor's control. It's learning to be with things I can't control. And there's a calming, acceptance is a calming force, I think. So I think I've been able to bring some of that calming energy into my life more than I did before I started doing this.
And do you think that in terms of dealing with problems, the perspective that you get from working with the terminally ill changes your approach to your own stress factors or your own difficulties in life?
Absolutely true. Yeah. No, I've learned a lot from people who are dying. It's like they don't have time to deal with petty little issues, and I realize, I don't need to spend time fussing and fuming over petty little issues either. I can conserve my energy for things that are much more important to me, and so yeah.
And did you have the same experience, or how has it changed you in your daily life?
It certainly does give you a change in perspectives. Like Ray, I think if I'm experiencing petty problems or annoyances, or maybe a desire that's not fulfilled for something very minor, and then I witness the ever smaller life experience of somebody who's dying, my problems tend to evaporate in terms of perspective, and it's also allowed me to become more comfortable with what they call don't know mind, not knowing what to do in a given situation. If somebody is perhaps making me feel uncomfortable for some reason, and I just have to sit with that and let it arise. If I have a wave of sadness that comes up, some kind of social awkwardness, I've just learned to let that arise and just accept the fact that I don't know what to do in every single situation.
Yeah.